It's Thursday night. That can only mean one thing. The Professor Brad Allen is back. Prof, we recorded the main podcast last night and you were exceptionally bullish on one side here in the Rams and the Seahawks. Let's take a look at the betting. We'll get the suspense going for another minute or two. Currently, the Seattle Seahawks 1.84, the Los Angeles Rams 2.19. The handicap is 1.5. Obviously, the Seahawks favored here at 1.98. 49.5 is the total, slightly favouring the under. Professor Brad Allen, the floor is yours, sir. What are we backing?
We are backing the Seahawks. -2.5, -2, -1.5, money line, whatever you fancy.
whatever you want.
I think we have seen historically Thursday nights as well that the blowouts are a little bit more common. You know, if the game gets away from you in the first half, I think teams are more likely to give up, and then you can just get sort of run over if you lose that will to fight.
Look at what Todd Gurley said during the week, and I quote, Thursday games are the dumbest thing ever. So he's obviously well up for this one.
Well, he's dealing with arthritic degeneration of his knee, so I can't imagine a 4-day turnaround is what he wants either. So yeah, he's ridiculous that they make him play, but it gives us something to watch and bet on. So they're well enough compensated. But why do we like the Seahawks? So myriad reasons. So feel free to jump in at any point and ask me questions, but I'm just going to talk at you for a little bit. So the Rams, obviously, I've been sort of down on them all season long. And I think there's two things happening here. One is that the offensive line is deteriorating and is now possibly one of the worst in the league. But at the same time, I think the McVay scheme is being figured out, which is partially why the offensive line is looking so much worse, because linebackers are no longer frozen in place by the play action. So let's try and deal with these one at a time. So we'll start with the offensive line. So it's the worst ranked offensive line in the league by Pro Football Focus. So we know that there's 2 new starters in the interior, and then the tackles are both grading much worse this year. Might be Andrew Whitworth on the left is getting quite old. He's 36, coming up 37. Then Havenstein on the right is just being graded terribly all year. So they're 28th in ESPN's pass block win rate, which doesn't measure pressure. That's just if you win or lose your block in 2.5 seconds. So 28th in that. Worst pass blocking by PFF. The pressure rate they're allowing is the 4th highest in the NFL, 42%. So they're doing terribly, essentially. So what teams are doing schematically, this was kind of the McVay scheme, obviously has been around a couple of years and it's now starting to get figured out, I would say. So teams are playing this 6-1 defense. So basically 6 men on the line of scrimmage and then 1 linebacker behind rather than a 4-3, for example.
This is more or less what the Patriots did in the Super Bowl.
Exactly. So, yeah, it was possibly started by the Detroit Lions in week 13 last year, and then people started to pick up on it. So what this does, it basically stops the outside zone, which is the key running play, which everything is built off. Because basically if you put 2 extra men on the line of scrimmage, it's much harder to just run the outside zone into those gaps because there's players there. Yeah. Right, so the running game isn't as effective, and the offensive linemen are worse. And then so they're running a lot more toss crack, which is basically a toss play to the outside, but you can't run play action as effectively off that. So whereas before it would look like exactly the same play whether they're running or passing until Goff turned around and started throwing the ball. Now it doesn't, and so teams aren't. Basically, the play action isn't as effective. So last year on play action, they were going 9.4 yards per play. This year on play action, 7.8 yards per play, which is 19th in the NFL. So basically, teams have figured out the scheme somewhat, and they're making Goff basically play like a normal passer. They're not letting him play action and beat him over the top. They're making him drop back 40 times and figure out the defense normally.
Which Sean McVay very much does not want.
No, and it's not been that effective. So over his last 9 regular season games, even ignoring that terrible Super Bowl and stuff, Goff has 10 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and he's taken 15 sacks. His completion rate is 60%. So it's not good, essentially. And the defense is been average, I don't know, the last couple of years. It's maybe slightly better than league average. So all of which I think gives us a team, which is probably a 9-win team at best, I would say.
So we're pretty confident that the market hasn't really caught up yet, because we looked at last weekend, the Bucs were getting 10. Look, this line opened at obviously the Rams -2.5, but obviously, we saw what the Bucs did to them. So we're kind of figuring if Jameis Winston did that kind of damage, then Russell Wilson should be able to do something similar.
Yeah, so market-wise, they did get bet against. I think that
Yeah.
game closed 8.5, 9. And then obviously they've been bet against this week. But I think you look at, I mean, I've already seen a couple of statistical models saying, this game should be close to pick and Rams might be a good bet. But that's kind of factoring the last 2 years where the Rams have been so good. And as I'm saying, I don't think that a number like that is factoring in how much this is deteriorating this year. And so 9-win teams, they still a good team, but not what they were. Now, the Seahawks, I think, are a better team, just on better team on a neutral. So Russ, by completion expectation over average, so basically when factoring in how far downfield he's throwing the ball, he's the best quarterback in the league. His completion percentage is up to a career best 73%.
Yeah, 72.9. Yeah.
Yeah, despite his average depth of target going up to 9.0. Yeah. So basically, he's throwing deep, which is he's the most efficient player on the field, and he's also completing like the highest number of passes he's ever done. So I think he's a top 5 QB. I think this is a top 10 passing game. Now, obviously, the historic issue with the Seahawks is that they don't let Russ do his thing. They want to run the ball. But Sunday against the Cardinals, the first quarter, the first 16 plays, they threw it 12 times and They only ran it 4 times, and then by that time they'd scored 10 points on offense because they were effective moving the ball, and then Jadeveon Clowney had his pick 6, so they're up 17-3, and then they got back to the Seahawks fever pitch dream, just ran the ball 1 million times. They got out of there in under 3 hours because they just shortened that game the way they wanted to. Now, on the other side of it, the Rams were on the pitch. I think the defense, they played 74 snaps, which is the highest all season, 4-day turnaround, remember. Now, Goff also threw the ball 68 times, 68 dropbacks, which, in baseball, you throw 100 pitches, you've got to have a nice 5-day rest. You go through your throwing calendar and all this, and you have a proper rest. He can't be used to throwing the ball 68 times. Football's a lot heavier than a baseball as well, and coming back in 4 days. So I would have some.
And you know what else he struggles with? The rain, and there is rain forecast in Seattle tonight.
Yeah,
so,
small hands.
Like
small
that.
hands.
Yeah. There you go.
And he struggles on the road as well. So I just think you've got the better team at home on a short week, and the more rested team. So I don't know. If I was lining this, I would have it 3.5 personally.
Biggest bet of the season?
It is my biggest bet of the season so far, yes.
All right, I love that. Right, you sold us so well. I can't even just come back to you and counter anything here because you're exceptionally good salesman with this. But in fairness, also, are they Rams without Marcus Peters? And I think we're waiting on Tyler Rapp as well in the secondary. Yeah. So they've got some holes there in the secondary.
Which, again, if the Seahawks are going to come out and throw the ball early, you do not want problems in your secondary because DK Metcalf, who we're going to get to later, he is a deep ball monster. And then Lockett is just one of the most efficient receivers the NFL has ever seen. So, you don't want problems in your secondary here.
Exciting. This is exciting. I'm really excited about this one. Okay, let's move on to the player props. You talked about DK and Metcalf even there, which is a terrific segue into his receiving yards, 48.5. And Brad, you probably put it up there. No, you're not backing the under on this one, surely.
We're not backing the under. So Metcalf. So I think he's a great bet for yardage and touchdown here. So he actually leads the NFL in end zone targets, 7 of them. He's 17th in the NFL in air yards. Right behind Devontae Adams. He's getting targeted downfield. Average depth of target is 16.3. So I think this number's been a little bit lowered by the game last week where he had 6 yards on 4 targets. But as I say, they scored their 17 points in the first quarter and then they just took the air out of the ball. I still think the Seahawks' passing defense is crap, and the Rams should have some success moving the ball. So hopefully they do keep up and force the Seahawks to keep throwing. But I would have this line at least 10 yards higher. I would have his touchdown, it's 2-1 currently, but way lower than that. I just think he will be. He's a very good bet to get a deep bomb from Russ.
Yeah, and you can also back him with 12.0 first touchdown score, might be worth a 10 or 20 quid anyway. Other one you're looking at, Brad, is Russell Wilson's rushing yards, 19.5 currently, which you can currently back at 1.93. Not much.
No, it's not a lot. So my standard, way of having a look at these player props is just going through some DFS stuff and then looking at some projections from Pro Football Focus. And they had this lined at 34.5. So I thought, well, maybe there's something that the Rams do specifically, which is Wilson's not good at dealing with, but that wasn't the case. He went over this by about, I think he had 92 rushing yards in last year's 2 meetings against the Seahawks. So I don't really know why this is down at 20. Perhaps again, this is artificially lowered by this Arizona game where they just didn't really have to do anything other than pound Chris Carson for 3 quarters last week. So yeah, I would say this line is 10 yards too low as well.
Sounds good. I'm going to just throw one at you here, Brad. Cooper Kupp, 78.5. Yes, it is a big number. However, 3 consecutive 100-yard games. Jared Goff goes to him a whole lot. I'm looking at that other line, the other main receiver there, Brandon Cooks, 73.5. Robert Woods, I think, is about 71. For me, he's definitely the number 1 target for Jared Goff. Like you said, I think they're going to have to throw to keep up anyway. And Kupp he just gets so many targets, Brad, that you're getting exceptionally good value once he's in under that 80. Like, I mean, 90.5, yeah, I'd probably be staying away, but 78.5, he could have 60 or 70 by halftime. Just one of those numbers,
Plus, second most targets in the NFL was Kupp, and as we saw last week with McVay, if he gets behind, he's happy to just abandon the run. He's not He's not an idiot going, "Oh, I'm going to run the ball." He will go full pass.
He's an absolute beast in the PPR fantasy league, which I am in with you, Brad. I'm 4-0. What record are you, Brad?
I'm 1-3, mate.
There you go. Yeah, okay, yeah. And I thought you were going to be a shark at this fantasy football, but it's just not going. There's a long season there yet, though. Let's be honest.
I blame Cam Newton's bulky shoulder, and then I've got Julio, OBJ, and Stephon Diggs, and none of them are doing anything. It's embarrassing stuff.
You would think that you're onto a winner there, but anyway, we will get into that some other time. People probably don't want to hear. Okay, I think we're at best bet section, Brad. I think it's pretty obvious, but call it. What's your absolute best bet tonight? If I have to give you one,
absolute best bet. I'm just getting the alternative lines up here.
Okay.
See, I think the alternative line is the way forward. I will go with Seattle minus 2.5, 2.07.
Ooh, like that. Love that. Okay. 2.07. I'm going with Cooper Kupp over 78.5 receiving yards. Lock it in. Cooper gets it done. He could even have it by halftime. Right, Brad, that is it from us. We've had fun as ever. Brad Allen is having his biggest bet of the season, which is always a good thing. I'm not jinxing by saying that, of course, Brad.
Easy there, Sully. Easy there.
Easy. But we will be looking forward to the morning with the YouTube highlights. Keep your phones on flight mode before we check, and someone informs us that hopefully the Seahawks win it, right? That's it from us. If you haven't checked it out already, the Week 5 main NFL podcast is now available to download on your preferred podcast app, or you can watch us on YouTube or Periscope. That was a good one. A lot of winners, 15 winners in the last 2 weeks. So hopefully we'll have a couple tonight as well. Take care.